Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com mailbag podcast, brought to you by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control with Austin Price and Rob Lewis. I'm Brent Hubbs. Don't forget about Blue Water Climate Control's free furnace deal. It's back in this month of February only. They're giving away only 20 furnaces with complete system installs. It's first come, first serve. How much will you save? Well, that's the best part. Normally, they cap the savings at $1,000, but this time there's no cap. So if you've been waiting and wanting that high-efficiency system with all the bells and whistles, now's the time. Give them a call at 865-299-2290, or you can go to bluewaterclimatecontrol.com to book your appointment online. They'll come out, give you a quote on your new American Standard heating and air system, and see if you're eligible to get that free furnace deal. Again, that's for the month of February only. Time is running out, and they're only doing 20 of those giveaways. So be sure and check them out at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com. Guys, plenty of questions to get to in this mailbag edition of the podcast, so we'll jump right into them. We'll start with Bronco Vol. He wants to know, hey, it's early, and I know they're unknowns, but what do you see will be the major needs in the class of 2022, Austin Price? What are the needs for this team? I know they got a lot. Where do you put the priorities for the needs in this roster, given what we know about the new coaching staff now?
Quarterback.
Quarterback,
cornerback, too, defensive back. I just don't think Tennessee's real deep there. I mean, I do think there is some talent in Tennessee's secondary, but I think they've got to add a lot of more depth. That's why I thought the loss of Keyshawn Lawrence was so big. Don't think, they'll take running backs. I don't think that that's necessarily something they have to have, but they'll take some. They'll take receivers because there's a lot of quality receivers in this in this recruiting class. But I would go O-line, D-line, defensive back, and quarterback as the main ones, just because you never can go wrong with the line of scrimmage. I think there's legitimate need in the secondary, and then also at, of course, quarterback.
No linebacker talk?
Yeah, I got to put linebackers in there too. I mean, and that's the thing. You got linebacker. I'm with you, Austin. A quarterback's a must. You got to have I don't want to say a franchise guy, but you got to have the guy you're going to build around in this offense. Corners, they're woefully thin at the corner position to the point that you got to be looking at transfers just for this season. But then, Rob, you got to get home off the edge with a pass rusher. And linebacker depth is a huge issue for this upcoming season. So, you got to replenish that in 2022 as well. I mean, I think the bottom line, Rob, lots of holes, lots of needs.
Yeah, and I see more on, quarterback aside, I see more of those on defense than offense right now. I mean, especially like AP talked about the secondary linebacker, and do you have anybody coming off the edge? I mean, is Tyler Barron or Morvin Joseph, are they going to develop into disruptive forces? But I mean, that's,
and if they do, that changes things, Rob.
Yeah, big time.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And I agree with you, Rob. I think defensive needs. That's not to say they don't have offensive needs, because they need offensive tackles. Obviously, they need a quarterback, as we talked about. But they've got, to me, more holes to fill, or more lack of depth, if you will, on the defensive side of the ball than there is on the offensive side of the ball. Austin, do you want to give any more details about the Jameer Johnson, D'Angelo Gibbs brawl that you brought up in the podcast? That's what CL.
I mean, that's like I just know that they had a good fight. A former coach that is not here anymore. Of course, none of them are here, but who's at one of Tennessee's biggest rivals, or main rival, broke it up. Hey, listen, it is what it is. Every team has their squabbles and spats, and it's more just funny than anything else. And somebody brought up D'Angelo.
How ballsy is D'Angelo Gibbs giving up 100 pounds? And what is it about Tennessee, a program where defensive backs take on linemen in the locker room?
It seems to happen frequently.
Do we think Jameer Johnson fell on a helmet?
Ouch. All right, let's move on before we dive into any more of those rabbit holes. We'll go to VFL 4297. Seeing a lot of positive buzz on social media and on the board regarding the hire of Scott Altizer. Can you go more in depth as to why this is such a good hire for Josh Heupel? Also, any other thoughts you may have on the staff? I think overall, from a recruiting staff standpoint, I do like what Josh Heupel's got done. I think and one thing I like about it is it does have a Tennessee flair to it, which I think is important, Rob, because you got to know how to recruit to Tennessee, because recruiting to Tennessee is different than it is other schools. Every school has its own nuances, but Tennessee's footprint in recruiting is a little bit different. And understanding that footprint and understanding how to recruit to Tennessee I think is important. I think the thing that you've seen with Scott Altizer, one, he's a good talent evaluator, has been for a long time, but the reaction on social media was from former players, which tells you the respect he has. And let's face it, Rob, the old guard, some of them aren't here and some of them are getting older. So who is your bridge to the past that you want to try to tie into your future? You better have somebody that can do that. And what better way than to have a guy who was here in a great run in the 90s and the early 2000s, who's also an East Tennessee native that knows a lot of these former players. I think that's why you saw the Twitter love that he got when the news broke.
I mean, that was going to be my first response ever, was like what you saw from former players who were here when Scott was, kind of running that recruiting department. And I mean, his track record speaks for itself. I mean, you look at the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, I'm not saying that he's the reason all those guys came here, but he found a lot of those guys, and not just the superstars either. I mean, you remember this story. One of his greatest finds was Arian Foster back in the day. You remember when, like, Randy? I mean, I'm not trying to throw shade on Randy Sanders, and I can't even believe I remember the kid's name. But Randy was recruiting the quarterback from San Diego.
No, that was Arizona.
No, Kovalchuk.
Yeah,
Oh,
Kovalchuk.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Richard.
How about that pull, guys? How about that pull?
That's a hell of a pull on a Thursday.
But remember, he was a year older than Arian, and Randy had gone out there to, like, watch the quarterback, and Scott was watching tape of the quarterback, and he was like, "Whoa!" I mean, they were playing. I think he was playing against Arian. They weren't on the same team, and Arian was a recruit. He was a 3-star guy. He was on a lot of Pac-12 teams' radar, and Scott was like, "Whoa, what about this running back?" And if I recall the story, Randy was like, I don't really remember. He's like, and Scott was like, well, maybe I think we need to go take a look at this kid. I mean, that's the best Altizer story that I remember. But he got it so well respected. Son of a football coach, long time. His dad, long time coach.
Carlos
at Austin Price's alma mater, Morristown East. But an East Tennessee guy that just bleeds orange.
Who gets more recognition when they go to East, Austin Price or Carlos Altizer?
Oh, Carlos Altizer, he's a legend. I'm a never was. So that's a definite and one awesome teacher that everybody loved.
Let me ask you, Austin, about just the recruiting staff in general. Do you feel the same way I do, that the fact that it does have a Tennessee flair to it from an on-campus recruiting director standpoint and other things helps Tennessee, and that's something that was a nice move by Josh Heupel to get a Tennessee flair to it? Or do you think that's a little bit overblown because recruiting is obviously different now than it was when Brandon Lawson was here previously or Scott Altizer was here?
I don't think it's how do I put this? Their impact is not overblown. Putting out the new, like, most people aren't going to, like, if you say Trey Johnson's coming to Tennessee, the common fan's like, who is Trey Johnson?
Right.
But the impact of Trey Johnson and or Brandon Lawson and or Scott Altizer or whoever else, to me is maybe not seen or felt enough that it should be. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't think that, like, I don't know, championship, because he's got these, but these guys to me understand the tradition, understand the landscape. And so they can look at a guy like, let's say, Jerry Mack, who's from Memphis, but hasn't coached at this level and or at Tennessee, and say, hey, here's something you need to know about this. They can look at a guy like Cody Burns and say, hey, this is something that, they've done here in the past, had success with it, yada, yada, yada. So I think that their impact will be far greater than maybe, I guess the initial, like, oh, they're getting a Tennessee guy back in here. I think that their impact is different.
Interesting. All right. To Bridgeville we go.
That's all you got for me is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think it's good. Well, what do you want me to say? It's the greatest point ever made by a Morristown East graduate. That should put a statue up for you in Hamlin County for that comment. Bridgeville wants to know, would it help the basketball balls to try some zone with teams like Alabama and LSU style of guard play? Rob,
I totally think so, and I know for a fact that they practiced it on Monday and Tuesday because they were shorthanded. Because they had 3 guys out for contact tracing, and I know from talking with some people around the program that they practiced it. Person I talked to thought they were going to play it on Wednesday against South Carolina, and then what do you see, Rick do? Not going to play zone.
It's not going to happen.
I mean, they spent a lot of time, from what I was told, on Monday and Tuesday practicing the zone, and maybe it was because they got 3 guys back who were out for contact tracing, and Rick didn't feel like he needed to. But I mean, to me, I mean, you win a game by 20, and that last once you get control, I mean, it was touch and go, a little bit there. First 10 minutes of the second half, Tennessee didn't really get a handle on it. But once you go up, Tennessee went up by 14 with 8 minutes left of the game. Why not throw it out there and, play it for 4 minutes with your guys and see what it looks like after you spent, an hour on combined Monday and Tuesday practicing it. Why not give it a look? But he just won't do it. I mean, I say this affectionately, but he's just hard-headed. I mean, he hates zone. He thinks it makes guys get lazy. I mean, he thinks. I mean, I've talked with him about it before. I mean, he thinks that if you're if you're Syracuse and you practice it and that's your DNA, then yeah, you can play it. But if it's a wrinkle, and you just spend 15 minutes a week on it in practice and you throw it out there, he thinks it makes you a worse rebounding team defensively. Thinks it makes guys kind of lose their edge defensively. But no, I mean, I'm with the poster. I don't know. I wish they would do it. I mean, I think it would make it better. I mean, and again, not full time, but yeah, have that in your pocket where you can roll it out there and play.
But as you mentioned, it's not in his DNA to do, and it doesn't appear like he wants to do that. Moving on to the next one here, Austin, for you. So now that it's been a couple of days, any insight into how this defensive staff may come together?
With the final 2 spots?
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on, what do they do, a 4-man front, a 3-man front, and how the defense is laid out, to me is a big determining factor on how they'll spend the last 2 spots. Because if they roll a 4-3, you could just say, okay, Rodney, you got the D line. We'll go hire a linebackers coach. You roll with Willie and Banks in the back end, and then you hire a special teams guy, who maybe can help in other areas.
I know you love this angle, so I want to run it by you. Any chance of Al Wilson and Eric Berry joining this staff?
No, I don't see that. But I think there's a chance for Raynoch Thompson and Steve Johnson.
Bill Carter.
One name that we have checked on, I don't think there's anything going there right now, but it would be just at least a tie, Austin, is a guy who was a GA at Tennessee years ago by the name of Larry Knight, who was here when Willie Martinez was here. Interesting, Larry Knight played for Tim Banks at Central Michigan and GA'd at Central Michigan with Tim Banks. He's now the defensive line coach at Georgia Tech, but he's been an outside linebackers and a linebackers coach before at Temple and some other places. I don't think there's anything going on there, but what you do when you try to figure out who somebody might be is you look for somebody who's got a tie, and that's somebody who has a tie to Tennessee. Again, nothing is brewing there to my understanding and talking to people. Don't know that anything will. Does he have enough experience at the linebacker position that you would want to go that way? I don't know, but you start looking for guys who have ties in some way to Tim Banks.
Well, and again, are they running a 4-man front or a 3-man front?
Right.
If you're running a 3-man front, maybe he could coach outside backers, which are pseudo defensive ends. If you're running the 4-man front, do they go the old route that John Chavis had when he was calling the defense from the linebacker spot, and you had Steve Caldwell with the ends and Dan Brooks with the tackles? Or does Banks become a walk around and they go Rodney, with D line, Coach X with linebackers, Willie corners, and another coach of the safeties, or just a special teams coach. I think there's a couple of different options you have here. I think the only way that Nick Toth is on the staff is if they decide to go that route and have a special teams coach, because he can actually help assist outside linebackers as well.
All right, let's go to the next one, AP. Let's talk some Ty Simpson. You knew this one was coming. If Tennessee's making a comeback in his recruitment, why would he not delay it a month or so and give himself more time to get to know Heupel and make sure he's making the right choice? Would you say the Vols are surging the last 24 to 48 hours, or just hanging in enough to make it interesting?
Hanging in enough to make it interesting. I would not say they're surging. I've never said Tennessee was the team to beat or the leader. Now, they were going to be the pick had Jeremy Pruitt still been here. And I get the comments of, wait a minute, he's going to play for Jeremy Pruitt in that offense, but he won't play for Josh Heupel in this offense. Like, I get that comment. I totally get it. But it all comes down to relationships. And Jeremy Pruitt had spent so much time on Ty that the relationship was, way deeper than just, what everybody else's relationship is with Ty. So I don't think that he's going to delay it a month because, everybody's coming off the board. Alabama and Clemson aren't going to wait much longer. And so if you delay it a month, you might as well just go ahead and pick Tennessee next Friday. That's my opinion. Clemson's going to move on. If you delay it past next Friday, they're going to move on. They've already started contacting quarterback out of Texas. Alabama's, they've offered like 8 or 9 quarterbacks, but they're only sitting on one. That's Ty. I think that when push comes to shove, it's got to happen sooner rather than later. And I think Tennessee did get a week reprieve. We'll see what he does. Again, I'll say it for the 400,000th time. It's head versus heart, and I think that's the easiest way to look at this. Is the head knows that the smart pick is not Tennessee, and it's to go with the 2 teams that are perennially in the college football playoff and have won national titles. And the heart wants Tennessee because that's where he feels most comfortable and that's the place he loves the most. But this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out and see where things go, because I know Clemson feels good about it. I know Alabama feels good about it, and I think Tennessee's more optimistic now than they were, just 2 weeks ago. So we'll be interested to see how this plays out. I do know this: he's going to have a lot of people at his announcement next Friday. I have a feeling that a lot of them are going to be rooting for Tennessee, and we'll be interested to see how that plays out if he doesn't pick the Vols.
Side note, I was going to say, side note for me too. It's going to be the biggest head versus the heart decision since Catherine Price decided.
She knew head was not. I was not.
I think she went with the heart. I think Catherine Price went with the heart.
Side note to football, I'm not going down that other road, but side note to football, that the NCAA says the dead period extends through the month of May. Helps or hurts Tennessee, Rob Lewis?
I think it hurts them when you've got a brand new staff. I mean, not that anybody has seen anybody face to face in a year, but at least they've been, talking, the narrative that they've heard from, say Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss or whatever. I mean, they've been talking to the same people about the same things for a year, whereas Tennessee's got a new story to sell. So, I mean, I think it hurts Tennessee.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah,
I really do. I think it hurts Tennessee a lot. I mean, how much different would things be if they were having junior days right now? Because you can start having junior days at the end of February, 1st of March. If players from all over this state and surrounding areas were able to come in here and spend time with the staff and see the staff and get a feel for the staff, how much does that ease the concerns about everything with Tennessee? I think it eases it a lot. Instead, you're depending on Zoom calls and things like that, and I just think that's that's just a tougher ask. And kids don't want to wait. Everybody goes, well, why don't they just wait? Why don't they? Because kids don't want to wait. Because right now, in every kid's mind, because they can. I mean, think about it. They were going to open it, but then they delayed it. Then they delayed it. We're for sure open. We got the vaccine going. What have they done? They delayed it again. So every one of these schools that are having success are sitting there saying, "Hey, they're going to keep delaying this because they're until this is totally gone." And everybody knows it's not going to totally be gone the 1st of June. Until it's totally gone, NCAA's going to keep pushing this off. Well, kids want to get their spot, much like they did a year ago. The same thing happened a year ago. Everybody jumped in there and got their spot outside of the select few, and they just held on for the ride. I think it could be going on. Same thing could be going on this year, which would hurt Tennessee.
Yeah, I agree with you both on that, on all points there. Next question: how do you think Fulmer will be remembered? A beloved coach or an AD that ran the program in the ground? Here's where I think that is. I think on the short term, Philip Fulmer is going to take plenty of criticism for the hiring of Jeremy Pruitt, the NCAA stuff, and the monitoring and all that. I think over time, people will go back, Rob, to 45-5 national championship and a heyday in the 90s that Tennessee fans would relish, and we may never see again. I think over time it goes back to the coach. On the short term, I think he takes criticism for his work as an athletics director.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, big picture. I mean, the best football coach Tennessee's had in my lifetime. Won a national championship, as you mentioned, 45-5. And I mean, yeah, he hired Jeremy Pruitt, but I mean, people in the know that he didn't have a lot of choice in that. I mean, once the people that the power players that put him in position to get the job wanted Jeremy Pruitt, and he was also just caught in a hurricane of dysfunction with the administration at the time. Was he a good AD? No, but he was a great football coach.
In my opinion, I think way more people are upset about the fact he's going to take $37,000 a month for the next 3 years than they are the fact that he hired Jeremy Pruitt. I think most people are going, okay, it's one thing to maybe even get paid through the end of 2021, but to be getting paid for the next couple, for the next 3 years, that's a bit ludicrous, because, at some point, you've made enough money off the University of Tennessee. That's all the comments that I've continued to get thrown my way. And I think they're justified. I think at some point, something should have been met in the middle and it would have said, hey, I'll take money for a few months, but not for 3 years.
On to the next one. Who do you see being the leaders on this team? How big is it that AJ Artis is still here and why? How surprised were you with the Jay Graham tweet? Are fans making too much of it? And what is your go-to post-game restaurant in Knoxville? Let's start first with leaders on this football team. I'm going to say this. I'm going to get this one started here. I think it's hard to say who the leaders are because you don't know how the staff changes go for somebody. And I'll give this example. I don't think anybody saw Nick Rivez being the leader, one of the leaders of the Tennessee defense under Monty Kiffin when Lane Kiffin was hired. Sometimes a fresh start for somebody with a new coaching staff changes kind of who your leaders are and who they can be because somebody's got a new lease on life. Okay. They're, it's a fresh start for them and they're kind of off and running. I think Alontae Taylor's trying to be a leader, wants to be a leader, Austin. But in terms of who are going to be the leaders on this team, I think that's an unidentified. I think it's an unidentified group at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, you see the people that Tennessee's pushing Tyler Barron out there on social media. We'll see, who materializes as a true leader on this team, and maybe that is Tyler Barron. Maybe that is Alontae Taylor. I think Alontae has it in him. It's just about being more consistent as a player. And being on the field. And I think because Tennessee's lack of depth there's no doubt he's going to be a major factor in the secondary going forward. Offensively, I do wonder who that's going to be, because the quarterback position is not going to be settled. The running backs are all inexperienced. The receivers are relatively all inexperienced. Velus Jones and Cade Mays probably should be the two leaders on the offense, but I'm not sure Velus is real talkative. Cade is. We'll see if he can materialize as a leader on the offensive side this fall.
All right.
Question 2.
AJ Artis, still here.
Players love this guy. Players love him. Players were big advocates for him. I think they're even a little bit unsettled that they still brought in the guy from UCF to kind of split the duties. But yeah, I think that's big.
Jay Graham tweeting about Alabama, Rob, overblown, or one of those things where Jay Graham probably ought to review that tweet before hitting the send button.
I mean, I have a hard time getting real fired up about anything on Twitter. I mean, I'm sure, I get Tennessee fans' response, but I mean, to me, it's kind of a tempest in a teapot.
Well, I'll tell you what I told him, that there was no juice worth the squeeze there, and he tried to tell me he didn't mean it the way it came out. I said, don't matter, it came out that way. So I was like, that was dumb. It's just plain dumb. With that said, I've seen responses to tweets that he had sent since he'd gotten to Alabama, with people calling him every word under the book, racial words. This was before yesterday. And so, that's the problem with Twitter is people hide behind their handles and, nobody's ever going to get to them and they just say stupid stuff. So, it is what it is. As Rob said, Twitter's Twitter.
My go-to post-game restaurant is the Crystal on Millertown. That's a number 1 with 2 apple pies. That's my go-to post-game restaurant. Guy wanted to know. That's where I stop on my way home most of the time. That's 4 Crystals, no cheese, fries, and 2 apple pies.
Nice.
I'm sure everybody wanted to know that. If you had to bet one way or the other, do you see Neyland Stadium as normal operations or limited operations next fall? When do you think a final decision will be made? I think the hope is that it's full capacity, but at this point in time, nobody knows. And I think if anybody says otherwise, then nobody has any idea of where this thing's going to be. But I think the hope and belief from everybody who needs that money, who's looking for that financial benefit of a full stadium, are hoping that there are full stadiums throughout the fall, in sports, regardless of what that sport is.
I think a lot of it depends too, Brent. Like, because I've told some of my friends this. I just think that a lot of corporations and or organizations, universities, any of those, those type of things are going to be slow to just open it back up. They're going to be more guarded with just turning it loose. I think it's going to take somebody, whether it's a particular school or a particular organization or a particular whatever, taking a chance. And then once one person does it, to me, there'll be a domino fall of people that open it back up in full. I don't think you're just going to see this, okay, the vaccine's out, we're good to go. I think it's going to take Fauci saying something or something to that effect.
Rob, PGA Vol for Life wants to know, why specifically was Kevin Steele never considered a legitimate candidate for the defensive coordinator position? What's up there?
I mean, don't you think that it's just nearly an impossible situation for a coach to come in and be asked to retain a guy, when he's starting from scratch, and there's a 30-year veteran of the coaching profession in the building who was hired by an athletic director that just got fired. I mean, it's one of the weirdest things ever to me. I mean, why they hired him in the first place, just so you can slap an interim tag on somebody for 10 days. I have tremendous respect for Coach Fulmer, but of all the things he did, that was one of the most bizarre. And it cost the university $1 million. I can see. I don't care what his qualifications were. I can see why Josh Heupel was resistant to that and wanted to hire his own guy.
Yeah, I think that's what it boiled down to, is that it just a comfort level there. And that's not to say that Josh Heupel dislikes Kevin Steele, but it's a comfort level. Kevin Steele, he knows everybody surrounding the University of Tennessee.
Was a finalist for the job 3 years ago.
Right. And wanted an interview for the job this time.
And led a palace coup to get Gus Malzahn fired at Auburn a month before he landed in Knoxville. I think it's a no-brainer why Josh Heupel was resistant to that.
Ding, awesome. Ding, 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 ding. If you had Palace Coup in your Volquest bingo, you win.
Austin, in the 2-minute drill, you commented about having a good group of running backs. Seems we've lost quite a few running backs. So would you review, maybe rank who Tennessee has at that position? What do you like about the running backs?
Well, the previous staff loved Jabari Small and felt like he was going to be a real playmaker for him going forward. And which is funny because, they wouldn't take Jabari Small for the longest time. Not, that was before Jay got here. That was more the previous, it was really more Jeremy than it was anybody else. Jeremy didn't really want to take Jabari Small until he knew it was going to get Big O, and then all of a sudden he changed his tune. But Jabari Small has really come on strong. Tyon Evans, Jalen Wright. I continue to think that D. Beckwith is going to get a look there until told otherwise. So in this offense, I don't think you have to have a stable of 6 or 7 backs. I think you need 3 to 4. He's easily got 3 to 4. So yeah, lost who was a loss, and they lost Ty Chandler for his final year of eligibility, and of course Cody Brown asked for a release. But I think Tennessee's still sitting good with a lot of talent at tailback.
All right, last couple ones before we get out the door here. What was the result of the coaching and AD changes in terms of buyouts, old salaries versus new salaries? We hit a little bit on what Coach Fulmer was making. I don't have the final numbers. I know Tennessee owes Central Florida like $6 million for taking Danny White and Josh Heupel. Obviously, they're trying not to pay Jeremy Pruitt the $12 million. They owe Jim Chaney 1.6. They're going to owe
Winky 450.
Winky 450. They're going to owe Kevin Steele $900,000, or just shy of $900,000.
But the guy did a lot of work.
They might pay T. Martin when it's all said and done. I mentioned Chaney. The price tag on that thing is going to be somewhere between probably $7.5 and $10 million to pay people not to coach, basically is what it boils down to, and to hire and to get the buyouts for Tennessee's new head football coach and Tennessee's athletics director.
So Hubbard, outside of, I mean, between the University of Tennessee and Austin Price, how much money has been injected into the Orlando area, into the Orlando economy in the last year?
Well, they could finish that lazy river at Central Florida now. I can promise you that, with the money that Tennessee is going to write them a check.
$6 million from Tennessee, and then very little from me this year, Rob, because of COVID.
That's unfortunate.
Speaking of, everybody's one. I'm just
Magic Kingdom has missed you.
I'm going to tell this story here on the podcast since we have a few minutes left. Everybody wanted to know who cussed me out at Disney World. So that was Jay Graham, and the reason Jay cussed me out was because Hubs put it out there that Jay had COVID, and Jay had not told his dad or anybody else that he had COVID at the time. And I knew that Jay had COVID because he had asked me not to say anything, but Hubs found out on his own and reported it. And of course, Jay felt like I had told Hubs, and then he came back and apologized later that day.
That's the sound of Austin Price backing the bus up over someone. Beep, beep,
wow,
beep.
Look at that.
So, after the fact, I'm just kidding.
While he was in a teacup, Hubbard. That was the worst part.
So yes, there you go. There's the answer to that question from 2 months ago. That was Jay Graham, who again came back and apologized later that day, but it was still funny nonetheless.
Rob, what do you think this basketball team's ceiling is in this tournament?
Oh my God! I mean, I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I go from thinking. I mean, they could lose to, in a 5-12 game, or I mean, they could be in Sweet 16. I mean, they could beat anybody they play outside of Gonzaga or Baylor, in my opinion, from teams I saw. So I mean, ceiling. I mean, they could get to the Final Four if they play like they did last night for 3 weeks in a row. But I mean, does anybody think they're going to play that way? I mean, I don't. I mean, the inconsistency of this team is beyond anything I've seen. And maybe it's COVID related. Maybe it's just because it's a crazy year. They have guys in and out. They didn't have a preseason. But when they play their absolute best, I mean, they could get to the Final Four. But I have absolutely no confidence they can do that for 4 or 5 games in a row.
If I were Rick Barnes, I would have me in attendance every night. That way Victor Bailey can shoot the lights out. I mean, somebody said last night he's going to be a key. I think Josiah James and Victor Bailey are guys that are going to determine Tennessee's fate, because Josiah does so much on the periphery, whether it be rebounds or assists and stuff. And then Victor Bailey, Rob, he's going to shoot you in games and he's going to shoot you out of games, and it all depends on the night. And he's going to continue to shoot it.
To me, I think the bigger deal last night was Fulkerson. I don't think Victor.
He ran it. He was aggressive.
Victor Bailey will never have another game like that in his life, in my opinion.
But he's still going to shoot the ball.
Maybe I'll look stupid in saying that, but Fulkerson can have a bunch of games like he had last night.
I agree.
19 points, 7 to 12 from the floor. I mean, he's not going to score 19 every night out, but he was aggressive. He was running the floor. When he got the ball, he was confident. He looked to do things. That, to me, was the most encouraging thing about last night's game, was Fulkerson by far. I mean, Bailey was great. He was phenomenal. But, I mean, to me, that was lightning in a bottle. Fulkerson is the more substantial thing. If he can do that consistently, then Tennessee's a much different team.
All right, last two here. Blue Miss Vol wants to know who's going to recruit Nashville, Austin.
I don't know yet.
Besides you.
None of that stuff's been decided. Did you say beside me?
Besides you.
Who do you put in Nashville? I mean, you can't put Rodney Garner everywhere. We know that.
No, you can't.
What are you rolling? You rolling Cody Burns? You rolling Golish? What are you rolling in Nashville?
I would roll. You're going to believe Jerry Mack in Memphis. I think it depends on who you hire in these final 2 spots. But I don't think there's going to be anybody with some heavy mid-state ties. So yes, Cody Burns makes some sense. Because there are receivers there, especially in the 2022 class. Rolling your offensive coordinator over there / tight ends coach wouldn't be a bad thing. I think a lot of it depends, how things shake out. Rodney will be in Atlanta. Now, he may venture into other areas, but he'll predominantly be based in Atlanta, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think you put multiple people in Nashville. I
Yeah,
think, or
I
in the
think that's where they
mid-state,
screwed up last year. Is
you
like
know,
T literally had Memphis and Nashville,
can't
and
do
that's
it.
unrealistic to have one
Yeah.
guy in both those areas.
No, too many calls you have to make, too many conversations you have to have on a regular basis. You can't neglect one city over the other, because I think feelings get hurt pretty easily that way. Everybody knows everybody, so they know if you call one area and you're not calling another area. I think you got to have multiple people involved in that situation there. So, final question out of the gate here as we wrap up the mailbag edition of the podcast, and that is, where did I go with this question? Offensive skill guy on the roster who's not played regularly that you think has the most upside if developed and coached. This guy says, did Jimmy Holiday come to mind? I think I'm most intrigued to see what Evans looks like, who just arrived at the running back position, and then I want to see how Malachi Wideman fits into this offense. What can they get out of Malachi Wideman? Is it as easy of an offense to learn as they all want to act like it is? And what kind of production can they get from Wideman? Because to me, he's the guy who can take the top off of it, and we know they want to stretch the field vertically.
Back with, because he's versatile. Where can they find a home for him? And maybe they move him all around and use him in a number of different places.
Yeah, for me, it's just, I mean, Hubbard, you talk in any of those three going to be sophomore wide receivers that we didn't see a lot of: Wideman, Callaway, Holiday. Any three of those guys are the ones I'm most intrigued about.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.